So, welcome everybody to the special edition of Head to Head. I am so excited that Ryan and I got out of the box. And even if our schedules didn't mesh, because we were just talking pre-show about our airline adventures, fun with flying, hashtag fun with flying. So it's hard to get both of us in the same place at the same time, particularly on a set schedule. So we said, you know what? Doesn't matter. We're going to record this thing. It's a conversation that's worth having. So I am glad you're here. And today we are going to be talking about popcorn worthy stories that we can get from our buyers. So this is so important, such a great skill to have. And we're with it, right, Ryan?
Yeah, we're gonna have some fun. That's my goal. Well, we've already been having fun. We should have recorded the pre-show because that was great.
Yeah, just catching up. Like it's so rare for us to, usually twice a year we run into each other somewhere, right? So,
Correct.
let me just kick this off. Let's get the housekeeping out of the way because we have too much to talk about to do housekeeping. So, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Kimberly Mackey. My company is New Home Solutions, and I like to say that my company is who you call when you want sales to be the engine to drive the train rather than running it off the tracks. So it's great to have more sales, but if we don't have predictable, consistent, and profitable sales, that's a real problem. So I get in behind the scenes. I do immersion consulting. If you were to draw a Venn diagram of what I do and what Shore Consulting does, it would cross over because I do train. But the bulk of what I do, it does involve that consulting, that getting in there and literally rolling up my sleeves and making sure that the parts, the pieces, the systems, the processes, everything supports where you want to create again, those predictable, profitable sales. So if I can help you with that, feel free to give me a call. Here's my contact information on the screen. And without further ado, it probably needs no introduction, but I'm gonna let Ryan take it away. Ryan, tell us about yourself, your journey, what you're doing with Shore Consulting, and of course about the book.
Yeah, the book. So, I've been actually, you know what today is? Today is, as we're recording this, today is my 11-year anniversary with Shore Consulting. So,
So today is your anniversary with Shore Consulting.
yeah, 11 years today.
That's impressive. Happy
Yeah.
anniversary.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. It's gone by in the blink of an eye for sure. And I've been in the new home space now. This is 23 years. So I just love this industry. I love the people in this industry. I think that we get to do one of the greatest things in the world, which is help people improve their lives via moving into a brand new home. So I tried resale for a hot minute. Wasn't a terrible fan of that. But yeah,
Me too.
yeah. And so, my journey has really been more on the psychology side of things, trying to figure out why people do what they do. And I have a lifelong pursuit of this. Anyone who has read my book will learn very quickly that I had a mother who was an alcoholic, and her behavior was so fascinating to me to understand why was she the way she was. And so I've just been immersed in the psychology and the neuroscience and understanding the why people do what they do, and then that gets into biomechanics, and I'm just a nerd when it comes to understanding people, and that really is what led to the book. So it kind of is this big arc for me of trying to figure out how people make purchase decisions or just decisions in general.
And it's really cool because one of the things that is so fascinating to me about this industry are the people we get to meet along the way,
Mhm.
and learning about them and their journey, and that's so rewarding. I think so. Maybe I'm a geek in that. I also have a minor in psych, and I say I use it every day, much more than the corporate communications degree that I actually came out of school with. But that minor in psych comes in very handy all the time.
We often say, like, or at least I say that home building would be the perfect business if the people weren't involved, right? No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. But but it is fascinating when you look at how and why people do what they do in our industry, and everybody has a story, and everybody has a reason for their actions, their behaviors, why they change companies, why they stay with companies, why they buy homes, why they stay in their home. It's all about people. So I always tell people we don't really sell homes. We sell life improvement, and our job is to figure out how do we do that?
Exactly. And I mean, it sounds cheesy, but this is a game changer for people. It's generational wealth. Like there is just so much that goes into a home.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yes, we sell houses to, and we do investors and yada, 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 yada. But when you're selling to a primary resident, you really are. You're changing lives.
Without question. It's one of the
Yeah.
greatest jobs. I mean, I always tell people, like, imagine working a different job. Imagine like being a roofer or, a guy who runs the jackhammer, right? I'm 5'4", I weigh 140 pounds. Imagine me on a jackhammer. That's like the worst job possible for me. I get thrown like
Yeah, that's probably not a
whole
good
lot.
job for you.
No, no, not a good job for me. So, this we are so blessed to be able to do this. So, and I appreciate you having me on. This is gonna be fun. I've been looking forward to this. I know it's been on the calendar for a little bit here. So, yay, this is gonna be a good
Yeah.
time.
Oh, I'm glad we worked it out. So let's set up the whole concept for people. So, and you and I connected on this because we're a kindred spirit when it comes to this, the idea of digging into the why,
Yeah.
digging into people's stories, and again, getting to know people as human beings, which to me is a lost art these days.
You're not
We
kidding.
like to define people. They're a prospect, they're an A, a B, a C, they're a Republican, they're a Democrat, they're green, they're purple, they're whatever they are. Like we somehow think that's the people.
Hmm.
And it isn't. Each person is their own individual, and they're coming to us at a time in their life where something is going on.
Totally right. I mean, I was saying in pre-production with you, people aren't sitting home on, maybe one of their one days off, right? Like if they've got a family, like that Saturday is run the kids to soccer and all the sports, and then there they are on Sunday morning, and they go, "What do you want to do today, hun?" Oh, I know. Let's have an awkward conversation with a salesperson. That is not what's happening. They don't want to come see you, to be honest. I mean, if you're listening to this right now and you're a salesperson, have you noticed that they're like hiding in their car for 60 seconds? You know what they're doing? Do you know what they're doing, Kimberly? Do you know what the conversation is in the car?
Yeah, who's the good cop and who's the bad cop?
Yeah, they're game planning, right? If I say the word buffalo, we just hightail it, just start running, right? Like they game plan because they're afraid that you're going to be a pushy salesperson, but they're there anyway, which tells you there's a reason they're there, and it's not because you have great two by fours. You know what I mean?
No, it isn't.
No,
Or even that your builder story is fantastic. Even if
no,
it is, they don't care yet.
yeah,
Yet being the key word, they don't care yet.
we have this phrase we use quite a bit that says know everything but only share what matters. I was taught back in the early 2000s that you needed to build value by telling everyone your builder story, your community story, and if you can get them to say yes a bunch of times, then they
Oh,
must continue to say yes. You remember this?
yeah.
And it
I worked
was
at that builder with my 25 questions that I had to do in a certain order. Yeah,
I
I was
know.
there.
Yeah, and the reality of it is that training, this is actually kind of an interesting concept that I've been digging into because I kind of wanted to see like where did we go wrong in training? Because that's where it started, right? The training I got was ask yes only questions because if you could get them saying yes, they'd be like must buy a home or something lame like this. And what happened, and I'd love your take on this, but what happened, I think, is someone took an actual genuine principle, right? A principle of that, like, if you study Robert Cialdini, he talks about the law of commitment and consistency, which says people tend not to argue with their own decisions. The law of continuity says when people, and here's the verbiage, when people say yes, they continue to say yes. Here's what someone did. They took that verbiage and they added a word, get. If you can get them to say yes, they'll continue to say yes. Well, that turned a true principle into a manipulation tactic where now everyone's asking yes only questions. And the problem with that is it doesn't work and it causes people to feel manipulated.
Yep.
So
We
I've
have to.
always had this problem with that.
I have a problem with that too. I tell people, I'm like, I'm going to teach you some closing techniques, but I'm gonna quote Spider-Man's uncle before I do it. With great power comes great responsibility.
There it is.
So it's all, don't try to manipulate people into buying a home. I don't believe it works. I don't believe it's right. And just please don't do it.
Well,
So that's what I teach people. But I say, but if it comes from a place of trying to help people because they came to you for help
yeah,
and you said, okay, I'm going to help you, then help
sure.
them buy a home even when they get stuck.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where those techniques can come in, but not, a yes momentum close is not about just getting people to go, yes, yes, yes. Oh, wait, I can't say no. It's about checking in with people. to double check that you're on the right path. Are you asking the right questions? Are you hearing them correctly? That's what the true power in a yes momentum is.
Well, it's them agreeing with themselves, not them agreeing with the salesperson, right? Let me give you an example of this. So in 2009, I wasn't feeling terribly well. I'm not a run to the doctor kind of guy. I'm pretty healthy, whatever. And I was 36 at the time. I'm 50 now. And something was off. I could just tell. And finally, I'm like, I need to go see a doctor. Anyway, end up at a specialist. They order a bunch of tests and all this. And I go through an ultrasound, CAT scan, blood work, and a chest x-ray. And all of that to come find out at the kind of like the final diagnosis is I got diagnosed with cancer in 2009. True
Oh my
story.
gosh. I
Yeah.
don't think I knew that.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Uh, and I'll never forget after we asked a couple of quick questions. My wife Melissa was with me. We actually weren't married yet, but we're sitting there in the office, and I ask a couple questions. She asks a couple questions, and then there's this pause, this really kind of like pause. And here's what the doctor does. He says, he says, "Okay, here's what we're gonna do. I have scheduled you for a surgery in 9 days from today. It's at Banner Health. You check in at 6 a.m. Don't be late."
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
I love that my watch does this happen to you? She chimes in like, "Hey, you're not a part of the story." Anyway,
I have mine muted. So.
there you go. I need to do that. So I say all that and I ask audiences when I tell this story, do you think that I looked back at that doctor and said, "Whoa, easy, commission breath, you're being a little pushy"? I didn't say that at all. I said, "You can get me in that fast? Thank you." So, to your point, yes, it wasn't even a question. It was the most assumptive close. He
This is what you're
basically,
doing. Yeah.
yeah,
This is
he
what we
just
have to
told me.
do. Yeah.
But my question is, why could he have the confidence to do that? And the answer is he could have the confidence to do that because he had a solid diagnosis. He knew what problem he was solving. So the difference between a drug pusher and a medical professional is one does not care about the end user. They're just trying to sell product. They don't even care if you die. A doctor, on the other hand, has a diagnosis process and is trying to figure out what is the best solution based off the problem. And this, to me, Kimberly, is really the big difference between if you look at COVID selling versus selling in a normalized market, right, where interest rates have gone up, is you can't just throw people at, we'd call them up during COVID, be like, "All right, you're number 312. I know your name's John, but you're now named 312. I know this isn't the floor plan you want, but do you want it? Because it's the one that's available. You don't want it? You're going to have to wait." That's not a diagnosis process. And that to me is we've got to make sure that we're slowing down in order to go fast. And this is really why stories matter because it shows you're interested, it shows your
It,
diagnosis.
it it absolutely does. And I hope we never go back to those days. So you just gave me like a little tick in my eye thinking,
I'm sorry about that. Didn't mean to
I
trigger
was
you.
like, oh geez, now I'm not, yeah, now the stress of all of that's going to happen. So,
Yeah.
and the fact that this happened to you in 2009, which again was that, I mean, 2009, I started my business in 2007 with New Home Solutions, and I did great for 2 years, even though those were the worst of times, right?
Yeah.
But in 2009, I was the first quarter definitely curled up in a fetal position until I figured out how to uncurl myself and move forward. Those were good times.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you
I'm
know
going
what?
out on my own and the world just ended.
In
Yay.
the world. Yeah, it's a great time for that.
Mhm.
But let's talk about I always say curious salespeople make good salespeople, and I know this is something that you talk about in your book and that really resonates. How do we get more curious? Because
Oh, yeah.
the salespeople, I'm role playing with them, I'm out there, and it's just like they're like pulling teeth to
Yeah.
get any information out of people. They're not listening. They're
Yeah.
listening to respond and not listening to engage.
This is okay. So I had to do a lot of research on this. In fact, I probably read 6 books on curiosity and like 27 research papers on this. And there's a lot on this
Because you
topic
were curious.
because I was curious. So my brother-in-law, Mark Sedafine, he's a painter in Albuquerque, said one of the wisest things I've ever heard. And I'd put him up against Aristotle and Socrates and all the likes. He says this all the time. He goes, "Nobody cares." And you know what? He's right. He's right. But here's the thing. There is a human need. Like, I don't care whether you go to Maslow's hierarchy, you go to the Bible, wherever you go, everyone's going to agree that there is a human need for attention and connection from other people. And in
Absolutely.
absence of it, someone will literally talk to themselves. I mean, some of y'all listening talk to yourselves on the way to work today if you're listening to this at work, right? We have that
I
need
have
for
really good conversations with myself. I find myself very entertaining.
right. I'm the most fascinating person I know. Yes, absolutely. Well, that's exactly right. We do that. So we live in a world right now where the attention and connection is actually going down, right? Social media, everybody's honed in on their phones. Nobody cares. People don't even hear what's going on around them, but the need still exists, right? So it means that when someone actually puts their attention on somebody and genuinely puts it on them, you become the most important person in that person's world. And I think people test this. Now, let's go back to the curiosity idea. In my research, I came across a really interesting book. It was a book more about corporate curiosity. So it wasn't for sales. And frankly, there were no books on this for sales that I came across. It was all corporations and teams and all that. But it was a book by Diane Hamilton called Cracking the Curiosity Code. And in there, she took the concept of curiosity, which is way too wide to really hone in on in 200 pages. But she took it and made it so simple. And she said this. She said, there's really two types of curiosity: trait curiosity and state curiosity. Trait curiosity is what you and I were born with. Every living creature is born with this. It's the curiosity to learn and to grow and to find shelter and food, and we're born with it. And that lasts for a certain amount of time. Another paper I came across was from a doctor out of London, Dr. Sam Wass. He's a child psychologist and a neuroscientist and all this. And he did a study that showed that the average child, toddler of speaking age, asks upwards of 73 questions a day. That was the average. Anybody who has kids is like, my kid's above average, or whatever. But then something happens where they stop asking questions, and we like to refer to that as the teenage years. Right? You have kids, you know what I'm talking about. Well, they don't ask zero questions. It actually was they ask two questions and then they turn 16 and it turns to three questions. Do you know what the questions are? The teenage questions?
No, I'm very curious to hear this.
What's for dinner? Can I have money? And then at 16, can I use the car? That's it.
And today they're using cars later because they don't mind us
You're right.
chauffeuring them around. I had to force both of my kids to get their driver's license.
I don't get that phenomenon. It's a weird deal. When I my birthday's on Christmas Day, and I was so upset that I couldn't get my driver's license on my 16th birthday. I threw a fit. I had to wait 2 days. But kids today are I'm just going to wait till I'm 18.
I was at the DMV on my 15th birthday to get the learner's permit, and on my 16th birthday, that was my present. So yeah, I don't get it either. But I had to push both of mine to get theirs.
No, it's
driving me. Why do I need to drive?
Well, so to that point though, with them being teenagers, is so that trait curiosity sort of dies off.
Right.
To your point, when you get to be an adult, especially if you're experienced, if you've been in home building for a half a minute, you're like, okay, I know this gig. And we sort of lose that curiosity. What I'm suggesting is we need to get it back. And there is something called state curiosity. And state curiosity is where you have to choose it to be curious about something. You know, for some people, they're interested in Civil War history, and some people are interested in, crocheting. They have hobbies. Well, that's state curiosity is what that is. My belief is that if you're going to be interested in anything, it probably should be people, because you're going to deal with them the rest of your life. Money is number 2 on that list, by the way. You're going to deal with that the rest of your life. So that is where we talk about, well, how do you get back to curiosity? And it's like exercising a muscle. And so I have activities and things I do with folks. One of them is go watch Jimmy Fallon interview somebody he actually doesn't know, not Justin Timberlake, that's his buddy.
Right.
But I think his ratings are better than Kimmel's because he's more curious than Jimmy Kimmel. Watch the two of them. Jimmy Fallon's like, wait, what would you do? Oh my God, what did she say? He's not like, oh, that's interesting. Okay. He's very curious.
He does. He takes it to the next level. Yeah,
totally.
Absolutely. And he's so personable about it, and self-effacing, I guess is a good word for him, right. Which is again a great thing for a salesperson to be.
Totally. 100% agree. So yes, you can exercise that curiosity muscle, but to your point, people just wax right over it. Someone says, well, we're renting and it's just time. And they make this face. It's just time. And we go, okay, got it. You don't got anything. You have no idea what they're talking about. But we're just moving on. So home ownership's important to you? Who talks like that? Don't be a weirdo.
And that's where I think our salespeople, I think they're trying to do a good thing because they say, I just don't want to be pushy. I just feel like that's too personal a question to ask, or I can't really ask it that way. And I'm like,
Yeah.
so ask it another way. You don't have to ask it the way Kimberly Mackey would do it.
Right.
Ask it another way, but ask it.
Oh, yeah, for sure you should ask it. I mean, I tee up this conversation a lot by taking this out of sales process. You and I were talking a little bit about this before. If I know somebody well enough to have a coffee with them, right? And we sit down in a coffee shop and I come in and I'm like, "Hey," you'd probably ask me like, "What's up with you?" And if I said to you, "Oh, I think we have to move." Your immediate question back is, "Wait, why? What happened?" You go right
Yeah.
for the story. You go too personal. You go to the emotion. You don't say, "Well, how many bedrooms are you looking for?" That's not what you do. Don't be a weirdo. So when someone says, "I feel like I'm being pushy," if you feel like you're being pushy, it's because you're trying to solve a problem you don't understand. That's a drug pusher.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
pushy. Like I went in with years ago, I was dating this gal who's a teacher, and we walked into a car dealership. It was a Nissan dealership. Sales guy walks up, figures out fairly quick that she's the one buying, and this is his only question. He goes, "Can I ask you what you do for a living?" She says, "Well, I teach high school." And he goes, "I have the perfect car for you." I didn't know there was a perfect car based off of that one
Based off
question.
of, yeah, exactly.
And he rolled up in a used green Nissan Sentra, which was the furthest thing from. And I just was like, how is that? But we solve so quickly and we're so quick to want to sell. I'm over here like, how about we follow Stephen Covey's advice that says seek to understand
Seek
first,
first to understand, then be understood.
right?
Absolutely.
So
Those 7 habits. And by the way, a book I read absolutely every year. I go through it in my lead from the side groups. We go through it every year, and I get something new out of it every single time. So, pro tip: read this book,
yes,
understand those 7 habits, and read them again and again and again because you'll always get something different from it.
amen.
But so we have to start with the principle that there's a good story, and we're curious enough to uncover the story,
Hmm.
not the sale. So I think your point there is just so spot on because we're about making the sale. And yes, that is your job description. But I think what Ryan and I are both saying to you is if you'll slow down a minute, hot minute, and spend some time with people, you will have a better time at your job. You'll love it. You'll build a rapport, which is going to come in handy when these people are attached to you for the next 9 months.
Yep.
You'll solve problems for people because you'll understand them. And most importantly, you will get some seriously popcorn worthy stories. So when I have salespeople go through this in the training and have them write their movie script, I have them write a movie script about a buyer.
Good.
And there have been times like we break out the tissues, like
Mhm.
we're crying. I'll get goosebumps. Some of these stories are just the most moving moment. Like when you hear what some of these people have gone through in their journey
Uh-huh.
and how they overcame it and how this person worked with them to help them to overcome it. That's the stuff, man. That's the kind of stuff that, we want to be able to share these stories. That's what connects us as human beings.
Hey, we've been sharing stories since creation started. I mean, this is so fascinating and exactly what you're talking about. In every training I've ever been in, and I've done telemarketing, network marketing, retail, new home sales. I've done a ton of things, and every training I've ever sat in, including mine, you hear the phrase "people buy emotionally." But the problem is most people don't know how to get to the emotion, or to your point, they're too they have a yielding behavior that keeps them from asking those questions. I would submit it's your job because you're not selling homes, you're selling life improvement. And if you're selling life improvement, it means you better know how does their life need to improve. Well, there's a story in that. So if that's the case, let me walk you back through something that happened to your point with tissue and all this. We had a rule in my house when I was a kid, and the rule was if my Uncle Gray was to come to our home for dinner, him and his wife Lenore, my brother and I were not allowed to ask my Uncle Gray about his time as a fighter pilot in World War II. And the reason we were not allowed to ask him that was because he'd start talking about it. And if he started talking about it, even up until he was 90 years old, he would relive that episode and it would turn into a mess. Dinner would be destroyed. We now know it to be PTSD. We didn't know that back then. But that has always been so fascinating to me to understand that people, if they buy emotionally, then you have to ask, well, the questions I'm asking, are they getting to emotion or are they getting to information? So you're either an information getter or you're a story getter, one of the two. And the questions you ask determine that. So as I'm thinking through this, I had another experience in 2015 with Jeff Shore where we were sitting in an airport and there were some guys having a reunion. They were Desert Storm vets. And they were laughing and joking. And then one of them said, "Oh man, I wish our buddy Brian was still with us." Clearly he did not make it out of Desert Storm alive, an IED or whatever it was. But they started telling stories about this guy, and then they went from laughing and joking to crying, and like within a couple of stories. And this is when it hit me in the book was this: is that first lesson was people buy emotionally, got that. Well, then where is the emotion hidden? Because we agreed they sit in the car and game plan how to hide it. Everyone look decorating ideas. No. So
on the way to the airport. That's my favorite one.
Yeah. I left my kid in the car. It's 112 out there, but I left him in the car. But if they're hidden in stories, then the question is, how do you get to the stories? And what is that process to unveil that emotion? Because no one says, I'm looking for 4 bedrooms and then starts falling apart crying. That's not how it works. What I found is that my Uncle Gray, if he would start to retell a story, he would actually time travel back to being a fighter pilot. So he would relive it. And if he spent enough time reliving it, that's when he started to refeel it. I call this the 3 R's: retell, relive, refeel. The same thing's true with your buyer. They suppress their emotion because they don't want the salesperson to get them. But if you're curious and you're interested and you're not trying to sell something and you really are putting your attention on and you ask good questions to get the story, the emotion comes out. And it's not by asking, so how does that make you feel? Motion is the root word in emotion. So I'm watching for body language shift, vocal shift, a deep sigh, dropping the head, whatever it is. And you'll see it if you're paying attention and you ask enough good questions.
You can see it. I was doing a role play 2 weeks ago in Rochester, and there was a whole room watching us do this role play. And we had a very genuine, real moment where I connected with the salesperson who was doing the role play. I was the salesperson. And it's like the whole room felt the energy shift. And we just kept going. But afterwards, everybody, when I asked them to do the download, they came back to that very moment.
Yep.
And they're like, his body language changed. And I'm like, and what changed? You know, and the leaning in, the cadence of the conversation change. You will know those things. So, and to that point, I do want to give a how-to in this whole thing. If you're standing in your garage sales office and you're trying to do any of this, it ain't happening. So I'm just going to put it out there just like that. It ain't happening. Get your butt out of that sales office and walk through the front door, because we bring company through the front door, and go into the heart of the home, which is the kitchen, and offer these people a beverage. And I do all of this before ever even introducing myself. I do that strategically because they do have a script. They just sat in the car. They decided who's going to be good cop, who's going to be bad cop, what the story's going to be, blah, 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 blah. By the time they followed this crazy blonde chick who just said, hey, welcome to Bodacious Builders. I was on my way to the kitchen to get a cup of coffee. You want one? And I turn around and walk. 100% of the time, they follow me.
Yep.
They follow me 100% of the time. I have never had anybody stand there and go, I'm going to the kitchen. They just go with you.
That's right.
And then they've forgotten and they're like, oh, wow, look at this weather. This weather's something, isn't it? Because the weather is always something. Like, you can find something to talk about. And then I get in the kitchen, I offer them a beverage, and then I do a little, now this won't work for you, Ryan, but I do this little hair twirl because I'm a very big personality. I know I am. And I go, I'm so sorry. I don't know where my manners are. My name's Kimberly, and you are? And now we're people. We're connecting. We forgot about scripts.
Yep.
Now we can have a conversation. It's purely a setup for a conversation, and I drink a lot of coffee. About noon, I have to switch to water and offer them water.
Yeah, by noon, you're like, come on in.
Maybe we'll have decaf just for that purpose.
That's maybe
have the stuff. Invite them into the home. They're buying a home, and they're a guest in your home. And if you're going to find their story, you got to get real with them. You got to make them comfortable. This is not about demonstrating the home. This is not about, is this the home for them or not? This is purely about just getting people in a place where they feel comfortable enough to talk to you.
I had a sales guy call me up right after the pandemic had ended, and we were starting to get back to actually having conversations, and it was starting to just get a little more normalized. Not that we're terribly there yet, but a little more. And this guy had started somewhere like at the end of 2019, so his experience was pandemic selling, right? So he
Right.
calls me up and he goes, Ryan, I don't know what to do. And I said, what's going on? He goes, nobody wants to talk to me. And I said, that's the job, dude. That you just described this whole job is how do you get somebody who is convinced that you are the spawn of Satan to actually hit their spouse and go, it's okay, I like him. Let's stay. Let's talk to him. I like him. That's the
Yep.
job.
That's the job.
And to your point, we're so quick to check the box on one question and just move on. I equate this to dating, right? If I went on a first date with Melissa and I was like, okay, so you doing okay? Yeah. Okay, great. When are we getting married? Like, I would not be married today.
No, you would not. You wouldn't even know her. She would have been out the door.
She would have been out the door, right? But so there's a relationship, and it's not one question. I was sitting in front of a room of veteran salespeople, by the way, in California recently, and I opened up the session with this. I said, "All right, here's what we're gonna do. Turn to your neighbor and give them 10 relationship building questions starting now. Go." And the room was like, and I'm over here like, how do we not have a bunch of questions to be interested, right? If you've ever read the book, and I think it's actually right, that orange one down there, Keith Ferrazzi, Never Eat Alone, right? Great networking book. But I feel like this is the opportunity to get back to how do I, if you were paid $1 million to find out more than anybody else about this person's life, what they do for a living, and or their favorite vacation, and just curious questions about just people, not selling a home, but just to be interested, right? In how to win friends and influence people. Dale Carnegie says it best. I quote it in Storygetter. He says, in order to be interesting, there's an order to it. You first have to be interested.
Absolutely.
So how interested are you? I had a guy in the class say, what if you really don't like people? And I'm like, that's a problem.
It is. And I hear that from salespeople a lot. Really don't care. And I'm like, then this may not be the right gig for you, because when you care, you're going to sell more homes.
Totally.
You will be more successful. So, and on this, there is an art to crafting a story. So if you're going to write a movie script, or you're going to write a book that's interesting, that's popcorn worthy, as we say here for this, then it has to have a good protagonist.
Yep.
And here's where I think we as builders get it wrong, because just like you were saying, oh, we were trained to tell the builder story. We were trained to do this and blah, blah, blah. We're not the heroes of this story. We're not the protagonist. I know. The protagonist and the hero in this story are the buyers.
Yeah.
We've done it backwards for so long.
Yeah. Well, most of the sales training of days gone by has been all about the builder. Very little about the customer. Let me tell you, you hear the words, let me tell you about. I cringe when I hear the words, let me tell you about, because the way I translate that is, get ready, I'm about to throw up on you. And, back to my brother-in-law's quote, nobody cares, right? Your builder story. At the end of the day, by the way, now pre-internet, okay, maybe some of that made some sense, but today people are coming in, they often know more than the salesperson. So this idea of transfer of information is no longer what this is about. This has turned into collaborative, consultative, relationship problem solving at its finest. I equate it to a medical professional probably more than any other job, which, by the way, do medical professionals get into people's business and have uncomfortable conversations? It's what they're paid to do, man. Could you imagine walking into a doctor's office and then being like, no negative stuff here, only positive things. Don't tell me what's wrong. No, the first question is, where does it hurt? What's wrong? How long have you been dealing with that problem? They are problem seekers before they're problem solvers.
And probably we shouldn't use Dr. House, if you've ever watched House.
Yeah, that might not be the right.
That's not the type of medical that we're talking about, because we don't want to almost kill them in order to save them. So,
no, we're trying to cut back.
We don't want to go that far. But yes, like my doctor is amazing. She's actually a physician's assistant. I'd rather see her because she will talk to me.
Yeah.
She will ask me questions about things that I hadn't quite thought about, and help me to connect the dots to go, oh, maybe that's why this is happening. instead of just, oh, this hurts. Well, don't do that.
It hurts when I do this. Well, stop doing that. That's hilarious.
Exactly. So we have to flip this thing around, and we have to understand that the buyers are the heroes. So if the buyers are the heroes, then our role is to be that catalyst, that mentor, that guide in the
Yep.
story. If we're
Yep.
the person that says, you can do this, and I'm going to show you how.
Yeah. Yeah. If you get the roles right, the story plays out much more effectively. The way I equate this is if you make you the hero of the story, it's no different than when you go to lunch with somebody, and all of us have somebody like this, right? You go to lunch with somebody, and no matter what you say, they find a way to turn the story around and make it about themselves.
Yeah.
Right. Like they might even ask you a good question. So, where'd you go on vacation when you went on vacation? You say, I went to Italy. Oh, I went to Italy. You know what my favorite? And they go, ma, 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 about Italy for 20 minutes about themselves. And you're like, I'm not interested in your story about Italy. You asked me, and now you're just talking. We don't want to hang out with those people. We never want to go back to lunch with them again. Well, in the sales process, if you make you the hero, that is exactly what we're doing.
It's so true. It's so true. So if we can just put all of that aside, I always say, a blind squirrel finds a nut every now and again, right? So when you sell, like you just go through the floor plans, you just, you play, that's how general realtors sell. Let's just show them something until something sticks.
Yep.
And eventually they'll like something and I'll be able to latch onto that, and then we can build something together. But in we start in the middle. We don't start at the beginning of the story, and we just try to like throw all this stuff out, and then as we figure out, oh well, they kind of like this, then we go back and we start trying to figure out the why. So backwards.
It
How
is.
about we just really understand, and we can paint this vision with them. And it does take a little while. One day I was in a sales office, and this guy comes in and he's talking about Harley Davidson motorcycles. Now, I know Harley Davidsons were in Milwaukee, right? That's where they started. I know what they sound like because it's very distinctive. I assume more chrome the better, because every Harley I've seen usually has a lot of chrome on it. And I know that there's an event out west, because I spent a lot of time out west, called Sturgis. I don't know when it is. I just know it's sometime in the summer, and it's in the Badlands of the Dakotas, right?
Yep.
And then I assume every week is Bike Week in Daytona, Florida, because I've never been to Daytona when it didn't feel like it was Bike Week.
That's fair.
But I think there's an actual Bike Week. I just couldn't tell you when that is. So this guy comes in and his wife is in tow. And she's whatever, arms crossed, just like obviously along for the ride. He comes in and he wants to see a tandem 2-car garage home, which means there's a normal 2-car bay with a stacked garage behind it.
Mm-hmm.
Because he wanted a workshop for his Harley Davidsons.
Mm-hmm.
He liked where our location was because it was close to where he was a weekend warrior with the bikes, right? So he was something, I forget, a professional of some sort during the week. But he wanted to be on that side of town because it was close to his bike club and his buddies that he rode his bikes with on the weekend. This goes on, I kid you not, like 30 minutes. The wife is not saying a word. She's still standing there with her arms crossed. Now, I have one floor plan that I can show him, and my trainee is kicking me under the counter going, come on, Kimberly, we only have this floor plan. Let's go. And I'm like, no, this lady's standing there with her arms crossed.
Yeah. There's a big fat story right there.
Yeah. So this was his motivation, right? So eventually he gives me he takes a beat, and I look at her and I'm like, so do you ride motorcycles too? Assuming the answer was no, but you know what happens when you assume.
Sure.
When she's like, no, and I really wish he wouldn't. It scares me to death that he does this, and I want no part of it. And I said, so, tell me, are you also excited about looking for a new home? No, I like my home. I just finished doing this, and we remodeled this, and I just planted my herb garden, and blah, 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 blah. And she just goes on and on and on.
Yep.
Now, we're not going to get that sale if she is not where he is. He's moving. He's already mentally checked out and he's moving. She is not there with him.
Yeah.
So the conversation goes on. And again, this is a 45-minute to an hour. We're still standing in the kitchen.
Yep.
Going on. And I asked her, I'm like, oh, well, tell me about your current home. Tell me about these projects. Now she gets excited. Now she gets engaged in the conversation.
Well, yeah.
And you could see where her passions were and what she was looking forward to. And after a few minutes, I said, if you're like most people, you probably have that list that is on my next home I'm going to have.
Right.
And she's like, yes, I do, as a matter of fact. And it was just the most natural conversation. And she listed off all of these things. And the one thing that she really wanted was she wanted a private home site because she loved to do her gardening. And she didn't have a private home site. It was a back-to-back home site. They couldn't put up a fence. This was a big deal to her that
Yep.
she had. Well, now I have information.
That's right.
Now I can help her to show her how, and again, and I said, well, we do happen to have one that we only have one floor plan that meets these criteria that you're talking about. We happen to have it under construction. Would you like to walk down and see it? It is not currently available, but we could build it 3 doors down because of our redundant, and we can show you that home site while we're down there too. Well, yeah, now she's ready to go. So
Yeah.
again,
And if you had not taken the time to dive into that, you would have had a giant sales stopping moment the whole way. I mean,
oh yeah, we'd have been following up. Well, assuming we did follow up, we would have been following up for weeks or months, or and probably would have just gotten ghosted because they go home and she's like, "Yeah, I'm not moving."
yeah.
So they did eventually. They did not buy that day. I'd like to say, well, they wrote the check on the spot. That didn't happen, but they did come back another 3 times. It took her a little while to really wrap her head around it, but
Mhm.
she kept going back to that home site because it was private and it had the
Yeah.
conservation behind it. And she was like we literally went out and placed cones where her garden was going to be.
That's
Forget where
perfect.
the home was going to be. Where's the garden going to go?
Yeah, because that's the story, right? Is what is it that she doesn't have where she is right now? Why is that an issue? Because what you find is you dive into that story and you're like, okay, so you don't have the ability to put a garden in right now. And I love asking stupid questions and telling them I'm going to ask a stupid question. I'll say, this is probably going to be dumb. I probably know the answer, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. For you specifically, and that verbiage seems to really resonate. For you specifically, what is your biggest challenge with not having a garden? And you're going to find, like, even though you know what they're going to say, and it's something along, well, I just don't, it's my place. I just go to just relax. Well, where are you relaxing now? I don't get to relax. And now you have motion and emotion. So now I don't just know the what it is, I know the why it is. And that story then allows us to be able to say, and I'm sure this is what you did. You walked out and you said, all right, where's the garden going to go? And that's where you came in with, let's map out where it is, because now you have a visual. And if you go back to the good book, it says where there is no vision, the people perish. I believe where there is no vision, the sale perishes. And you're getting her to see that future story, right? So there's the story of what she's coming from and why, and now you're painting the picture of what the story will be.
Yeah.
And that's it.
We have to know where are the pain points because they didn't, like you said, they didn't just get up and go, well, let's go have an awkward conversation with a salesperson. So,
No.
no, there was motivation. There was enough willingness to get in a car and go somewhere and have a
Yep.
conversation.
Right. Yeah, because at the end of the day, she says, well, I wish he wouldn't do this, which means he's going to do it anyway. So he's either going to do it, and if this is the way I'm thinking, if he's far away from the bike club, that means he's actually riding further on the
Riding
bike.
further. Yeah.
So by putting him closer, that actually puts him on the bike less time. So there's actually a benefit to her for that if we can get her mind wrapped around it, but it can't just be about him and the bikes. You had to bring her in, and you saw that very clearly with that eyes crossed, arms crossed, legs crossed. This is they fought the whole way over.
Oh, I'm sure. So, and you could totally feel the tension for
Yeah.
sure with
Well,
that.
again, it's being interested in people and not, for those of you listening right now, Kimberly and I are so on the same page on this one, is that you have to slow down to find out, well, what's going on in their life, right? That's causing this to even be a conversation. Get off of trying to sell a home. That's not what you're doing. You got to find out what is the life issue here. And interestingly enough, in 2010, they did with the U.S. Census. I wish they would have done it in 2020. They didn't, but in 2010, they asked a really great question for our industry, and it was this. It said, if you bought a home in the last 10 years, why did you move? Great question. 36 million respondents to the question. And it
Wow.
came down right down the middle. 50% of people moved because of something that happened in their life. The other 50% moved because of something about their home. Here's what I think. I think if you dug into the people who moved because of something about their home, the
It was
real
something that
root
happened in
of
their
that,
life.
something that happened in their life. That's what I
Yeah.
believe. So, so as you guys are thinking about your questioning process and your sales process, just remember, it's not about the home. The home is the piece that will give them the life improvement. But if you're talking about bricks and sticks and features and benefits and all that in your company's story, nobody cares. They care about themselves. And then that story is a perfect example of that.
I think so. And the thing is, and as salespeople, we're so afraid to find this out, but no movie or no book is good if there isn't conflict. We have to have, and that's what we're most afraid of as salespeople. We don't want to get to conflict because we want everything to be all unicorns and rainbows and
Where did
sunshine.
that
And
come from? Where did
I
it?
don't know. I don't know.
Everyone's like, it's like Disneyland, and I'm like, Disneyland has its problems, man. But realistically, you're look at if you look at the framework of any good story, there's three parts to any great story: dream, struggle, victory. The Bible, dream, struggle, victory. Star Wars, right? If you go back to the original Star Wars, 1977, the subtitle of that movie, if you
Boy,
follow,
that made me feel old.
I'm with you. Right. The first movie was called A New Hope, Dream. The second one in 1980, 81, Empire Strikes Back, Struggle. That, by the way, is the favorite movie of all of the Star Wars, is that one, the Struggle one. And then 1983, Return of the Jedi, Victory. You cannot have a good story without that struggle part. It's what creates the push and the pull of the emotion. And so, if you look at there was a movie, and I want to say it was called The Gift. I think that's the name of it. But it was a story about a kid whose grandfather was dying, and he was going to leave him all of his wealth. And the grandkid was spoiled. He was a jerk, like all these things. But the grandfather put a condition on getting the wealth, and it was this: it's you get nothing until this point. And by the way, I'm going to take everything away from you. And the whole movie is him having to figure out how to be a humble person. So the beginning is he's rich and a jerk. 3/4 of the middle part is how he figures out how not to be a jerk, and he gets totally humbled and turns into this amazing philanthropic human being. And then in the end, gets the wealth. The best part of that movie is the middle part,
The conflict.
the
Yeah.
conflict. Every
That's the
buyer
story.
has that. Every buyer
Well,
has.
and in my Harley Davidson story, I mean, the conflict was the wife that didn't want to move.
Right.
She was set where she was. Everything else was all unicorns and rainbows. And while it was interesting to talk about Harley Davidsons, again, I know those 4 facts about Harleys, and that was it.
That's
So,
pretty good.
the fact that I was able to talk to the man and converse intelligently, it really was just, making sympathy noises and real okay.
Making
Mean.
sympathy noises.
When you don't know what else to ask, just go, how do you mean? And people will tell you all.
Yeah.
It's not grammatically correct, right? So if you don't even know how to peel those layers of that onion, because I always say peel the layers of the onion until you get to that good stinky part in the middle that makes you cry.
Yeah.
Then you've got enough information.
I get asked this question a lot, and I'm sure you do too. It's like, well, what if you're getting into like the really, really deep personal stuff that's like too personal? And my response to that, and I'd be curious to get your response, is maybe they don't want to tell it to you, but isn't it helpful for you to know that? Right? I think it's helpful for you to know what's going on in their world for a couple reasons. One is so you don't misprescribe, right? You know how many times I've done this myself, and I've heard salespeople say things. Well, like, so for example, I had a salesperson out of Sarasota who caught wind of something about the house and a dog and whatever, and that's all they got, frankly. And they went out and they said something like, they opened up the sliding glass patio door and said something lame like, could you visualize your dog running out here? What they didn't find out was the reason this couple was moving was because the dog had gotten hit by a car in front of the house, and the wife could not stand to come home every day and think about it. And she was just killing her. So they end up, she says this stupid thing, and they run out of the house crying. I did it. When I was in resale for a hot minute, I had a couple who I heard, this is what I heard. Now, this is not what they said, so there's a big difference. I heard we want to live.
That's key right there.
That's key. They said, we want to live on a golf course. That's what I heard. That's not what they said. Thinking back, they said we want to live in a golf course community. I heard on a golf course. So I show them this home, view fencing, tee box right there, beautiful. And I walk them in, I do the big reveal, and the wife sees the view fencing. She starts crying and runs out of the house. I look at the husband. I'm like, what just happened? He goes, yeah, this isn't going to work for us. We have a peeping Tom in our neighborhood, and that is terrifying to her.
Yeah.
I never saw him again. And I should have sold them a home. I sold their kids a home. They own like 5 churches chickens. They were cash buyers. I totally botched that. Why? Because I was too quick to solve.
Yep.
And I didn't get into the uncomfortable part, the stinky part, as you say.
Yeah. If you don't get it, take that time and, even in a role play situation, I say the goal here is for you to make it 3 minutes before you start talking about product. 3 minutes.
You know how hard that is for some people?
That is so terrifying to a salesperson. So sales leaders, when you're watching this is your task. Teach your sales team and role play this. One time I did an exercise. I'll just share it with everybody because sales managers, you should do this. We created video mystery shopping, that role play. So the teams knew they were role playing and they were allowed to videotape themselves. No one was around. They could edit it. They could do whatever they wanted to demonstrate what they were supposed to be doing based on the training that they had had. Now, again, no, people who haven't been trained, that doesn't work. But when they know how to do this and you start timing them, one of the criteria was how long was it before they started talking about product?
It's great.
Pay attention. If you can't go 3 minutes without talking about product, and the buyer will try to suck you in because they're going to come in and they're going to say something like, I'm looking for a 433. Okay, that's not enough information. And unless you're Alice in Wonderland, you want to go down the proverbial rabbit hole, you're probably not going to sell them a home. Like,
No.
you need to know so much more.
I like doing those in groups of 3 where one person's a salesperson and with the same thing in mind that says just see how long you can go without getting into product, a business conversation, and one person's a customer. The third person has an air horn. And if the person goes into product, the salesperson does. And you start the clock over. It's hilarious.
I'm going to probably have to add an air horn to my repertoire. Can we get that through TSA pre-check?
Well, I usually get them to have it on site for me, so I don't have to travel with stuff. But yes.
Oh, okay. So yeah, if I can get it through TSA, then yeah.
But it's comedy. It's so fun because people don't realize they're doing it. And then you practice, well, okay, let's see if you get sucked into that conversation. So you tee up the customer to do exactly what you said. I was looking online, saw you guys had inventories. Can I just take a look at that? Come on in. Well, I was just about to go get a coffee. Why don't you come on? Just what you said, right? You weave in that relationship building and stay off of product, because the minute you go down that rabbit hole of product, you're into feature benefit land and you have no idea who's even standing in front of you. That's like me walking into my doctor's office and without him doing any diagnosis saying, so what drugs are you interested in?
Yeah, exactly.
It's a product conversation.
Yeah, and yet we do it all the time.
Yeah.
We talk about the conflict. We've talked about who's the protagonist and the role of the builder and the salesperson. But there does have to be a plot progression. And sometimes we like to go straight to resolution, but that's not reality. Reality is the plot has to progress, which means the buyer needs a plan. Like, that's the role of the salesperson, is to make it simple and make it easy for the buyer to go in 3 easy steps. Yeah. The next step is to do blah, blah, blah. And then we just do it. I mean, that's what an assumed sale, an assumed close is all about, is just telling them what the next step is and then doing it.
So good. I think we ought to stay away from cliffhangers here, right? Like if you look at typical stories with cliffhangers, don't leave the buyer on a cliffhanger. And here's why. When a buyer is left to their imagination, this is a scary process, right? Moving is in the top 5 scariest things you could do between getting married, divorce, death in the family, job change, moving. And when we look at that, if you leave them on a cliffhanger, then they go into their imagination and they'll imagine a worst case scenario. My wife says, don't let a baby dragon turn into a full-grown fire-breathing dragon. Give them that progression, that plot progression, as you said. Show them what that path is going to be, and then do what you said you're going to do. And make it very clear, because in a buyer's mind, easy equals right. And if it's difficult, that becomes wrong. And if you're not communicating and I don't know what we're doing and when we're doing it, then am I supposed to call? Are they calling me? What are we doing? Are we supposed to go to design center, or are they going to call? You have to make it easy for people. Paint by numbers is the best way. Think Bob Ross, for those of you over 40.
I was like, I don't know if anybody's going to Google him.
Bob
He's still,
Ross.
I think there's still a YouTube channel.
There is. He's probably more popular now than when he was alive.
That's probably true. But yeah, that plot progression is so important, and I think we forget that people don't do this every day. So they're looking for us, and I love when we actually create a handout that this
Hmm.
is what you do. These are the easy steps to buying a home, and this is how it works, and this is what you're responsible for. This is what we're responsible for. And I work with all of my builders to come up what is the sales process so that
Yeah.
we know it, we can share it with our buyers, and everyone in the company gets on the same page so they know what their role is all the way through, and we're all just, you know, we're singing from that same sheet of music, if you will. So to mix our metaphors really badly.
I like
But
mixed metaphors. It's good.
yeah, I do that a lot.
Our story has turned into a musical.
Yes, well, those are good. But that leads to the resolution, right? And that resolution is that not that we sold them a home. That resolution is that they now have a path forward. They have a solution. They've met at the airport for that fateful hug and kiss, and they come running to each other. I mean, it's that cinematic finish that they know we're going to be in our new home.
That's right. Yeah, this falls under something called the peak end rule or peak end theory, right? That people won't remember all of the nuances of the whole experience, but they will remember the peak moments, particularly the end, right? Like if you go to a concert and we'll just say like, I don't know, we'll pick the Rolling Stones, right? They're still around. So if
They
they're
are.
still around, it's amazing. But if we look at that, right, you would expect that there's certain songs that the Stones are going to play, right? They're going to play "Start Me Up," they're going to play "Brown Sugar," they're going to play "Satisfaction." Let's just say that their closer, right, is typically "Satisfaction." That's the show closer, and they
One
could
would
do so
expect.
many. Yeah, yeah. So you go to the concert, lights go down, Mick Jagger comes out, the concert starts, and he's doing his thing, running around at 80 or however old he is. Like that guy is better shape than I am. But they end and they run off stage, and of course the audience is like, okay, well they're going to come back out and do the encore because they haven't played Satisfaction. So the lights are down, everyone's like screaming for them to come out for the encore, and then all of a sudden the house lights come up and the house music starts playing, and you realize, uh-oh, there's no encore and they're not going to play Satisfaction. It could have been the best concert ever, but because of that last moment was such a dud and it fell so flat and it missed expectation, you will tell people that concert sucked just because of that one
Yeah.
end. And that's exactly what you're talking about, is what is that big finish, that moment, right? If you watched the Avengers End Game, right? It was the I am Iron Man, right? That moment, that is that big piece. I remember I violated this so bad once, Kimberly. I had a buyer come in to get keys. Now, granted, it wasn't my buyer, it was my partner's, but doesn't excuse this. I was
Right.
busy and I was running around doing stuff, and I didn't even know they were coming in. And I remember them saying, "Hey, we're here to pick up our keys, blah, blah, blah. This is our lot." And I go into the file and I'm looking through everything and I find the set of keys. And I kid you not, I handed them this little manila envelope, had them sign a piece of paper. And on the vanilla envelope was what I perceived to be, and I'm pretty sure it was, like when you go to Taco Bell, if you've ever gone to Taco Bell, they give you like the little packets of like the mild or spicy, I don't even know if it's salsa, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Some sort of sauce.
some
Yeah.
sort of sauce. I'm pretty sure that the little tiny envelope had some of that sauce on it. And I handed it to him and said, "There you go. The sign here. Cool. Awesome." What an
That
absolute
was
fail.
Yeah, and that was their big moment. They got their
Yeah.
keys to their brand new home. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Hope we do well on the survey. No, no, get out.
And again, we get to be a bit robotic because we do this every day,
Every
and we
day.
don't
Every day.
stop and we don't think
Yeah.
about what this is. There was a survey done, an exit survey to why people didn't buy a home, and the number one reason was because they weren't invited. And I put that out to everybody to say, if you don't include people, if you don't invite them. I know I've done mystery shops where I've pulled up to multi-million-dollar homes, and because I was in a rental car, they assumed that I couldn't afford that home and treated me like like, she's not buying. These are the moments. These are those opportunities where we can really make a difference and we can make people feel welcome and special. And even if they can't afford to buy your home and ultimately you have to refer them somewhere else, they're going to remember how you made them feel during this process and that you took the
Totally.
time to listen to their story. And chances are they know people, they know somebody else.
Yeah.
I truly believe that,
I do.
so this is the long game. This is not about how many people can I get today and snap, snap, snap. And no, if you're in it for that, you're probably not going to be around as long as you and I have been at this for it. That's a lot. We've been at it for a quarter of a century, half a century between the two of us. So,
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
that's a long time. So, and
Thanks
it was
for
because
reminding
we
me.
were curious.
Well, one last point on that is in the last 23 years, probably 24 now, walking in and out of model homes frequently. I've done this twice in the last 45 days, and this would include those as well. I've only been asked for the sale 4 times in my entire life in new home sales, four ever. And I've walked through, I mean, all across the US, in downtime, just stop in, and before like the books and the videos and all this stuff, nobody knew who I was. And, I walk in wearing a concert t-shirt, Vans tennis shoes. I'm a Gen Xer from LA. I look like it. Maybe I don't look like I have money, but I've only been asked for the sale 4 times ever in my entire life, including recently right here in Queen Creek, Arizona, with a top 10 builder who I walked in. They never regged me, never asked any questions other than, do you have any questions? Then they told me to go to their website to go take a look. I mean, it was awful.
Oh, so you drove there, but they send you the website to look.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was magical.
So, and I'm going to throw this out there. I know we're running long on time, but I'm going to put this out there because I think it's so important. If you don't invite every single person that you encounter who got in their car and drove out to see your homes, if you don't invite them to live there, you could have a fair housing violation. So this needs to be like just your normal everyday. This is what we do. Everyone in every opportunity gets invited to live in your communities. And it's so much easier to ask when you've gotten real with them and you get to know their story.
If you have somebody who's got a real big issue, in my book I tell a story about Chelsea Timmons. Chelsea, and she tells a story about how she found out this couple there was an active shooter in their apartment complex,
Oh my
and
gosh,
a bullet went through their bedroom window, their son's bedroom window, into the closet, and there was a bullet hole through the onesie. And
that's terrifying.
they could not stay, obviously, because the husband opened the door, caught eyes with the shooter, and the guy got away. So this guy's the eyewitness and he knows where he lives. And anyway, so she gets this whole story from them. They're couch surfing. Do you think she was nervous about inviting them to come live in their community? No. She was
I
like,
hope
okay, you
not. I
guys
hope
have
she
to
knew it
move.
was the right thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely it was. And so, if you're sitting there and you're saying, gosh, I'm a little nervous about asking for the sale, first off, number one is you're making it about you and it's not. Number two is, did you get enough of the story to figure out why they need to move? Because when I ask you for the sale, I'm not asking you to give me money and I'm not even asking you to buy one of our homes. What I'm asking is, do you want to hire me and my team to help you improve your life? I'll do that all day. So you're right. You have to do that. And the funny thing happens when you ask everyone for the sale. You make more sales. Shocker.
There's a thought.
Mm, it's math.
Yeah. Guys, there's so much to this. I mean, we could keep going on,
Good.
obviously, for
Good.
hours about this because obviously we're both very passionate about it. Thank you for writing this book and getting this down for our industry. And I'm in awe of you that you did this while traveling 200 days out of the year and everything else that you
I don't know.
do.
It's a
So
blur. It's an absolute blur. I did it on weekends and on airplanes. Just yeah.
yeah, as someone who did, I struggle to do this and concentrate on an airplane, like and there's I take micro naps. Like it knocks me out when the plane goes up for takeoff. Like I don't know what it is. I only sleep for 30 seconds. I don't like sleep on an airplane, but I do take like a 30-second micro nap on an airplane. So the fact that you
Awesome.
can do all of this is very impressive. So,
Well, thank you.
and thank you for making time to join me today. And I think people are going to listen to this for and replay it. And I hope they share it at their sales meetings and hopefully we can change some trajectories here.
I love it. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, you take care. Safe travels, my friends.
You as well. Talk soon.